Welcome to Divisionalysis. I'm Fog. In the first Coyotes video, I showed the optimal setup for your high-end builds, and we explored the Coyotes mask. This time around, we're looking at gear set builds, and some of the results will surprise you. Let's go. Right, quick recap. Involves the Coyotes mask, and it is dependent on engagement distances. And you may differ in your gameplay, and you may be more aggressive, you may be less aggressive, whatever it may be. It does make a difference to the end result. But what I found across probably around about 10,000 enemies and recording the engagement distances, this is what I came out as. 0.5% of the time I'm engaging in less than 5 meters, and that's only when a rusher gets through or something like that. 25% of the time it's under from 0.6 meters to 15 meters. 36% of the time in that mid-range. 27% of the time is a little further out, and then we even have around about 11.5% that are actually outside of 35 meters. And I plotted all the different missions, gave them best fit lines. You can see that there is a genuine trend that is there on gameplay, and it is very hard to alter that significantly. The spawn points are designed to be a certain way. If you are a speedrunner and you are camping and you know exactly where things are, then obviously it's going to skew slightly to the left, but this is how it looks for the average player. And what that means is that you're looking at 25.5% of the time, 0 to 15 meters, 36% of the time is 16 to 25, and then 38.5% of the time it's greater than 25 meters. Now, for the purposes of this video, I am going to assume that you are slightly more aggressive than what I was in my whip through all of the missions to gather this data, because it's going to help me as far as the calculations are concerned. And I'm going to shift out past 25 meters and 16 to 25 meters. I'm going to shift some of that weight to the 0 to 15 meters so that the more aggressive players out there, and we're 4 years in, we're into our 5th year, so let's assume that people are more aggressive. And I'm just going to give it an even distribution across all 3 engagement distances, so 33.33% for each and every one of them, because it makes the calculations a hell of a lot easier as well. Okay, so while we're solving what is the best and most optimal setup, we may as well answer out the age-old question: what's the best in slot last remaining piece? Is it Contractors with 8% damage to armor? Is it Foxes 8% damage to target out of cover? Or is it Grupo with 15% extra crit damage? Is it Fenris with an extra 10% weapon damage? Or is it Ceska with an additional 10% crit chance? Now, in order to establish that, all we need to do is work out what all the different combos are that we can make with these. So all of my strikers pieces and the mods are crit damage. I'm missing 0.2% of the total because RNG hates me. I can only get one 12% crit damage mod. But the absolute minimum that we can have as crit chance for Ceska is 47% with 153% crit damage, and obviously variations exchanging crit damage for crit chance from there. For Grupo, our minimum starting point is 37% crit chance and 168% crit damage. For Fenris, our starting point is 37% crit chance and 153% crit damage. And for the last two, being Fox's Prayer and also Contractor's Gloves, those are both going to have the same base starting point of 37% crit chance and 141% crit damage. We start from there and we work our way up. So I'll start with the Ceska build options. We started at a minimum of 47% crit chance and 153% crit damage, which means we can exchange crit damage for crit chance and make that a 53-141 build, or we're going to make it a 59-129 build. Now what we can do here is we can work out what the average crit damage to every single shot is going to be, averaged across every single shot, and that's just simply the crit damage times the crit chance for that average. And what we need to do is at 0 to 15 meters we are going to add 25% to the crit damage and do the calculation. At 16 to 25 meters we're going to do an additional 10% crit chance and 10% crit damage, and at 25 meters we're going to add 25% crit chance up to the cap of 60% crit chance in all cases. So as we move through at 0 to 15 meters, the averages for those engagement distances are as such. So the averaged crit damage added to every single bullet is reflected here. Now obviously with a higher crit damage you're going to see a better result for higher crit chance. But as we go through, those with the higher crit chance lose out on the crit chance benefit that's added by Coyote's mask at those extended distances. So we can see a slight reversal as we move through the mid distance, with a 47% crit chance getting the maximum benefit whilst the others reaching the cap. And then we have the final amount with the lowest crit chance option, 47-153, having the highest crit damage amount, obviously taking massive benefit from the higher crit damage when all of the crit chance is added. And then what we do is we take our engagement distances and how often we are encountering them, but as I said, to make things easier, it's just 1/3 applied to each one, which is the total, divided by 3, and the results are as such. And what you can see here is that a clear favourite emerges for the Ceska build. The most optimal Ceska build setup is a 47-153. Before I actually went in and checked, I was doing these calculations and I actually had the 41-165 option in there as well, and it actually produced a better result again, but it's not possible with Ceska. So this is what I found the most surprising, is that the optimal setup for a Ceska as your 6th gear piece is 47-153. Probably much lower than I think that majority of players would actually be running right now. And now we move on to the next. For the Grupo build options, we started at 37% crit chance and 168% crit damage. 43-156, 49-144, and 55-132 are our options. I didn't go to 60-120. Most obvious reasons, but the results, there we are. 0 to 15 meters, 16 to 25, greater than 25 meters, a whopping result for the 37% chance at outside 25 meters, obviously offset by the lower numbers closer in range. And again, we multiply each one by 1/3 or divide the total by 3 to make it easy for me. And the results were as such. In the case of Grupo, the best results were achieved at either 43 or 49% crit chance and their corresponding crit damage amounts. Very, very close. But again, less than 50% crit chance is that sweet spot. Fenris, 37-153, 43-141, so on and so forth. Here are the figures and the results. Once again, we see that the optimal setup is actually much lower than what I expected, and I imagine the majority of people out there expected. 43% crit chance is the optimal setup. Very, very close between 49 and 37, but if you're over that, then you are doing it wrong. Foxes and Contractors, there's the setups that we can go with. Here are the varying results across the engagement distances, and then the result for the optimal setup. Again, much lower than expected, 43% producing or just edging out 37%. Just 37% is very close to being the optimal setup. Who would have thought it? But now we have the optimal setups for each and every build type. Okay, those optimal build setups for each of the different types were these that produced the best results. And here are the results as they stand so far. But in order to work out what is best in slot for a striker's build, we are going to have to work out the additional 10% weapon damage for Fenris, the additional 8% damage to targets out of cover for Foxes, and the additional 8% damage to armor for Contractors. Now the easiest way to do this is to work out what the average bullet damage is. Rate of fire and ultimately your DPS has no effect. That is a weapon configuration thing, which isn't really of concern here. What we're looking at is the gear type. So average bullet damage will give us the end result that we want. And additionally, the stacking of strikers has no impact whatsoever. It's an amplified damage talent, which means that any amplification is going to apply across the board equally to every one of the average damage figures, whether it's at 0 stacks or at 200 stacks. So for the calculations, it's 0 stacks, makes no difference. I've also run with 82% out of cover, and I'm running at 10% headshots. Additionally, this is based on a 4-slot assault rifle, important note. And I've divided this into both mission and checkpoints, and this is to give Contractor's gloves the best chance of success. For missions, from my research, the average armor percentage for enemies is actually only 40% because of the number of reds that you encounter in a mission. At checkpoints, the number of elites ramps up, or the percentage of elites ramps up, and it then jumps to 55% of the total health pool of all the enemies that you encounter will be armor. So it's 82% out of cover, and it is 40% armor for missions and 55% for checkpoints. The results are, for these builds, in missions, 242.94 for Grupo, 240.56 for Fenris, 243.9 for Ceska, 236 for Foxes, and 229 for Contractors. So Contractors doing the absolute worst when in the missions only 40% of the damage that you do is going to be armor based. But there we have Ceska eking out the win over Grupo and just ahead of Fenris. For checkpoints, we have 236 for Grupo, 234 for Fenris, 237 for Ceska, 229 or 230 for Foxes if you round it out, and Contractors still bringing up the rear, even with an increased armor percentage on the enemies that you're facing, at 225. So if you haven't been paying attention, the end results are, from worst to best, Contractors with the optimal setup being 43% crit chance, 129 crit damage at 227,000 as your average bullet damage. Foxes at 43, 129 at 233k per bullet. Fenris at 43%, 141, 237k. And at this point, I will point out with Fenris, it is a weapon damage percentage add. For the most part, most people will be running all reds. At least that's what people tell me, is that all reds is the go-to. If you're running all reds, that puts you at 100% weapon damage plus an additional 30% assault rifle damage, which are additive with each other. And so the additional 10% assault rifle damage that you're adding has a massive reduced benefit from diminished returns. This result is further worsened if you have expertise on the weapon that you're using as well, adding additional weapon damage and further reducing the effectiveness of the Fenris brand set bonus. But if you run blues on your build, then the additional weapon damage will have less diminished returns effect, which means that your result with Fenris will improve. Bear that in mind. Bringing in number 2 is Grupo with a 49-144 setup for 239.55 as the average between missions and checkpoints, and bringing it in at number 1 at 47% crit chance and 153% crit damage for an average of 240.5 thousand per bullet at 0% striker stacks. The winner is Ceska, but it is only just. And it is so close amongst these top 3 that it is actually almost pointless talking about. If we give 100% to Ceska, Grupo comes in at 99.6% of the result and Fenris at 98.6%. So bearing in mind what I said about Fenris before, that if you're running a couple of blues, it is quite literally going to be neck and neck across the top 3 results. And not only that, it is going to be so close between the 3 that it will likely actually come down to the quality of the piece that you have. If you've optimized everything, then you can eke out a massive 0.4% advantage over the competition by running Ceska, but that is provided that you are running the optimal setup, which is 47% crit chance, which means that every single mod and every single roll on your build that you possibly can has to be rolled to crit damage, and you're running a 4 mod slot weapon with 3 of them being allocated to crit chance, which is the optimal setup. These results will hold fairly true for most gear sets. If you're running a Coyote's Mask, it'll hold true for Ongoing, True Patriot, Heartbreaker, even to an extent Hunter's Fury, but you will be obviously engaging at much closer distances, so you probably want to take maybe 1 more crit chance. But where it will change is when it comes to Umbra and Negotiators, and those will require a different setup if you're running the Coyotes. But there you have it. The argument should finally be over. You can go back over the results. If you think that you are massively more aggressive, then you're probably going to want to go for a slightly higher crit chance build, but it would take a lot for you to sway the figures in favor of doing that. So if you like, then like. If you want to see me run the numbers for SMGs, for instance, or shotguns, let me know in the comments. If you want to see me do the numbers for Umbra or Negotiators, put that down as well. But I will see you in the next one. Fog out.